always intend these things to be like lessons for people, and so I try and have some element of teaching in each of these sessions. And of course, they're going to be on YouTube unless I take them off there. They might be there for years. So I want them to be as visually appealing as possible. Was talking to Phil the other day, and he said that he was watching last week's call, and he said, "Gee, I was talking about this book that I read." And Kathy says, "I'm here listening, but I'm eating breakfast, so I turned my camera off." So I was talking to Phil, and he said, "Gee, I was talking about this book I read by Adele Davis, and up on the screen was this picture of this book." He said it was amazing. So I said, "Yeah, well, that's what I do when I edit these videos. I tend to sort of cut out stuff that's irrelevant, and I might put in some graphics or some pictures or something, because I consider them to be lessons, right? So I try and make them, visually appealing and valuable, valuable for people. So I'm going to give Arturo a chance to introduce himself in a minute or two. But I'd like to ask Phil. So what have you done this week in terms of setting up your binder and that sort of thing? Have you made any progress there?
Well, I've printed it out, put it in a nice binder. I decided that I maybe put the. I mean, this is. I shouldn't get into the weeds here. Basically, I've read through it, sort of got an overview of what the whole, all 20 some pages of it, what's in it. And I watched some of the videos, and I've had a conversation with you in midweek, and I'm thinking about how to apply this to my business, which is a networking business around health products.
Right. Well, that'll come clear.
Yeah, and actually yesterday I had a bit of a breakthrough. I acted on an impulse and did something I've never done before, which is do a general posting of sort of a generic statement about the importance of investing in your health. And I got 20 responses and sent out some videos.
Great.
Highlighting, the primary product that I'm flogging.
Yeah, that's good. So this program, it's based on a program that I bought when I was around 29, I think, 28, 29. So, that's a while ago. And I was at a real turning point in my life. And so I bought this program, which consisted of some cassette tapes and this workbook. And the cassette tapes were explaining the idea behind the workbook. And so the idea was that you set goals using the worksheets in the workbook, and you listen to the positive recordings that talked about the value of goal setting and the value of personal leadership and developing a positive attitude and things like persistence and following your plans, overcoming obstacles, all those sorts of things. So I got such huge results from that program that basically I've been teaching it ever since then. So this goes back to around 1980. So I've been sharing this program with people for over 40 years, really. And I made a living running around the country doing workshops on basically this program, right? Now, of course, it's evolved since I started it with Paul Meyer because I've added my own twist to it. And like any program that you do, if you get into it, it starts to morph a little bit. It becomes more your own thing, right? So the easiest the easiest way, I think, to understand what this program is all about is that it's a place for you to dialogue with yourself. So those worksheets, as you fill them out with your ideas. Now, a friend of mine, some years ago, he was on a silent retreat. As a matter of fact, Phil, you told me you're going to go on a similar retreat, I think, pretty soon.
This coming weekend, my wife and I.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's the same. Is this the Vipassana meditation retreat?
No, it's not quite that Spartan.
Okay. Well,
but it is about meditation and getting in touch with silence. But in between meditation sessions, you'll be talking about it and all that.
Right. Well, I'm not sure how closely it relates to this one that my friend was on. But anyway, what he told me was this was like, I think it was a 5-day or 7-day retreat where you didn't talk. It was basically meditation. He said you get up early in the morning and you meditate, and then you have some breakfast, and then you talk to the guru, and he gives you some tips, and then you go back and you meditate again for a couple hours, and then you have lunch, and then you meditate again, and you have something to eat, and then you sleep, and then you get up early in the morning and you meditate again. So he said you meditate about 6 hours a day, right? So I said, well, what do you meditate on? And he said, oh, well, the guru gives you a question. He gives you something to think about, right? So I said, okay, well, what's the question? He said, the question is, what do you want? So I said, oh, wow, that's interesting. Because that's basically the first question in this program, right? What do you want, So I said, okay, so you meditate, for like 6 hours the first day, and you don't talk to anybody except the guru, and you spend 6 hours meditating on this idea, what do I want? And he said, yeah. And I said, and you do the same thing the next day? So he says, yeah. And I said, well, what's the question for the next day? He said, oh, it's the same question. What do I want? I said, what? Really? You're kidding. What about the third and fourth, fifth day? He said, oh, same thing. So I said, you spend a week in silence, meditating 5 or 6 hours a day on the question, what do I want? And that's it? And he says, yeah. I said, how was it? He says, it was absolutely life-changing, mind-blowing, He said, my life is totally different. So now I have experienced this myself in a sort of a minor way, right? I mean, I've never spent 6 hours a day for a week meditating on one idea and not talking to anybody about it, just thinking about it. But what I've found is that the experience of working in this workbook is very much like that. As a matter of fact, it might be exactly like that. So the point I'm making is this program is about examining your thinking and noting the kind of thoughts you have, the kind of feelings you have, the ideas that come into your head as you're going through this process of filling out these worksheets. And the questions on the worksheets are very specific. Like the first one is called the Master Dream List. Well, the question basically is, what do you want? What are your dreams? If you could have anything, what would it be, right? And then the next thing that you do, and of course you can do this in any order that you want. I mean, it's your process that you're going through, but this is sort of what I experienced. And then the next thing was, okay, you have all these dreams now. You wrote down a bunch of dreams. You got a page full of dreams, perhaps, right? So then what you do, or at least what I did, was I prioritized those two different ways. I prioritized them in terms of importance. So there's a sheet in there called Priority of Dreams Desire. Like, what do I want the most? Of all these dreams, if I could only have one, what's the most important one, right? And you prioritize your dreams that way. And here's how you prioritize them, by the way. What you do is you number them. Let's say you have 25 dreams, right? So you number them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 25. And then you compare number 1 and number 2. You say, if I could only have one of these, which one would it be? You might say 1. Okay, so you put a tick by number 1, right? And then you compare number 1 and number 3. If I could only have one of these, what would it be? Well, it would be number 1. Okay, put another tick by number 1. Now you compare number 1 and number 4. If I could only have one of these, which one would I choose? Number 4. Okay, put a tick by number 4. And you do that all the way through. Number 1, you compare it with 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to the end. And then you do the same thing with number 2. If I was comparing number 2 and number 3, which one do I want the most if I could only have one? Right? So that's the process. It might take you half an hour or something, or you might do it over a period of days. It doesn't really matter. But what you end up with, so then you have all these little tick marks, right? So then you put them in terms of the ones you want the most. So the one with the most ticks, that's the one that's the priority for you. That's the one that you desire the most. It might be number 6. It might be number 7, whatever it is, right? So you rank them in terms of desire. What's the thing I want the most? Now that's very helpful because that process right away kind of clarifies your thinking quite a bit. Like when I go through this process, what I notice is that sometimes things which I put down there that I think are my dreams, when I actually think about it and compare them, I really don't want them all that much, like it's not that important to me. So that's one bit of insight that I got. Then the next thing is you do the same comparison again. You prioritize them, but this time you prioritize them according to what's the easiest one. Like one of your dreams might be, buy $1 million house. Well, that might be a great goal, but it might not be the easiest one, right? So another goal might be lose 5 pounds, learn to speak Spanish, get my engine in my car serviced, those kind of things, right? Whatever comes to mind, whatever it is that you think you might want, put it on the list, and then compare them according to ease. Now, what I found with this ease list, starting with the things that are the easiest, that's an important list because one of Paul Meyer's principles, he called it the magic of spaced repetition. And as it turns out, spaced repetition is the thing that will change your life. like this friend of mine doing this repetition of this question for a week, like 6 hours a day. What do I want? What do I want? What do I want? That's repetition, right? So spaced repetition, as it turns out, will change your brain. If you've heard about neuroplasticity, this is it. It's repeated, focused attention. Now they have, this is not Anthony Hamilton's theory here. This is scientific proof. I can point you to a book that'll explain it all. The book is really dry. It's a scientific treatise, But nevertheless, what they proved was, if you focus your attention on something repeatedly for even a few minutes a day, focusing your attention repeatedly, within about 30 days, they can measure changes in your brain. It literally creates new neural connections in your brain. So this spaced repetition is really powerful. This is why I tell people, work in the binder every day. Make it a priority. Work in that binder every day. Doesn't matter, how long you work in it. You work in it for 1 or 2 minutes is fine. Some days you may spend an hour in there if you really get involved in it. But just to open the binder and start the process and answer some of those questions, fill out the worksheets, if you do that every day, I'm convinced that your personality will change and your brain will change. Your self-image will change. A lot of things will change because you're going through that process. Now, of course, the worksheets in that binder, they're not just random worksheets. There's not a worksheet in there that says, what did you have for breakfast? What kind of a car do you have? There's not a worksheet in there that asks that question. Because it's not a diary, The questions are things like, what do you want? Why do you want it? What's the payoff for you when you get it? And we look at your goals and your dreams in 6 different areas: mental, physical, spiritual, financial, family, and social. So as you get into this process, you might have dreams and you might have ideas and goals and things in all of those 6 areas. So one of the questions might be, what's the payoff for your kids if you achieve this goal? What's the payoff for your grandkids? What's the payoff for your family? What's the payoff for you? And what's the payoff for you socially? Will it improve your relationships? What's the payoff for you physically? Will it improve your health? What's the payoff spiritually? Whatever spiritual means to you. To me it means that kind of unseen part of our life, the spiritual dimension, right? The invisible dimension. And then, so there's a transition that takes place. There's a transition that happens at some point between thinking about your dreams and thinking about your goals. So the difference between a dream and a goal is, a dream is anything you want. Doesn't matter. Big, small, cheap, expensive, doesn't matter what it is. It can be anything. That's a dream. But a goal is something different. A goal is something very specific. A goal is an experience that you have decided to experience. So it's something that you have decided. So you decide, I'm going to do this. I'm going to buy a new car. I'm going to talk to the banker about a mortgage. I'm going to go to the gym and find out how much a membership costs. So that's a decision. And when you make a decision, that becomes a goal. So a goal is a possibility that you have decided to experience. That's my definition of it. So you make a decision to act on one of these dreams and actually do it, or at least make an attempt, start a plan of action, start taking steps to actually make this dream a physical reality, a part of your life. That changes the dream into a goal. And a goal has some specific qualities to it. One is it's clear. It's as clear as you can make it. It's, you know, it might be fuzzy at first, but it'll become clearer as you go. You have a time limit for it. You have a plan to achieve it. And you're working on your plan today. You're doing something today to move you ahead toward that goal. So those things are the things that characterize a goal. Because a book called Psycho-Cybernetics, which was a classic book, sold 8 million copies or something. And what the author in there says is that your mind is an automatic goal-seeking mechanism. So, and they've proven that to be true. So in other words, when you focus on a goal, your mind starts to change and your brain starts to change, and you start to get all kinds of ideas about how you could possibly achieve that goal. So a goal is something very specific. Now, most people in my experience don't know this. People think, oh, you know, I wrote on my you know, the first page of my binder in January, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds. So that's my goal. Well, is it a goal or is it a dream? The question is, what are you doing today to create that goal in your life? If you're not doing anything today, then it's not a goal, it's a dream. And of course, if it's a dream, doesn't have any power, your mind is not going to do anything with a dream. Your mind basically only works on goals. So that's a key thing to understand. And so a couple of weeks ago, I asked Naomi, what have you been getting out of this process that we've been following this year? Because we've been doing it now for a year. Jessica and I have been doing it. Naomi joined, I think, in March. I'm not sure. And Greg, too. So, and one of the things she said was, I feel like I finally found the right path. I'm on the path now to getting what I want. What I'm learning from you is how to think and what to think and how to work with my thoughts. So I thought that's absolutely perfect, because when I was putting this binder together and I was thinking about this program of Paul Myers, what I realized was these different worksheets are worksheets that you need to do specific things when you are on a path, when you're on a journey. And we've all been on journeys, right? I mean, Arturo's journeying all over the country now. He just got a new job with the railway company, and every week I think he's in a new city, right? So basically thinking about a journey from where I am right now to where I'm going, that to me is the most valuable metaphor to think about this process that we're following with this system. Every day we take steps, one foot in front of the other, even baby steps, to move us towards our chosen goal. And of course, we may have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 goals that we're working on. Ideally, they're all sort of aligned. I mean, they have to be aligned, otherwise we're going to be pulled in different directions. But we'll get into that later on. So basically, one of the things that I studied when I was putting together my own philosophy, Anthony Hamilton's philosophy of what makes your life work, I studied a lot of Buddhism. And in Buddhism, they have this term, bodhisattva. Now, bodhisattva means, literally what it means is awakening consciousness. And the symbol that they use in Buddhism, as you're probably aware, is the lotus blossom, right? It kind of, it opens up all these leaves. It's kind of a progressive opening. So that's the thing, is this Bodhisattva literally means awakening your consciousness, expanding your consciousness, becoming more conscious. That's what it means. And they talk about the Bodhisattva path. So we now are on this path of expanding our consciousness. That's what this process is. Now, something else that I studied was Chinese philosophy. You've heard of Lao Tzu, the guy that started Taoism. So what does the Chinese word Tao mean? Well, what it means is way. Way. It means literally street. You walk downtown, you might see a, 4th Avenue, 6th Street. Oh, so-and-so way, right? Waterfront way. So literally, what people have been talking about for, at least 2,500 years that I know, is this is the way. You follow this path. So that's the path that we're following. So it's the path of awakening. Awakening your consciousness means becoming more aware of your thinking. Because a lot of our thinking is unconscious. Most of it's unconscious. Maybe 95% of it is unconscious. So the purpose of filling out the worksheets and going through this process of identifying your dreams, identifying your goals, trying to figure out what your plan is, what's a possible thing I could do today to move me towards this. Think of it as a path. I think that's probably the best way to think about it. And so some of the other worksheets, they are specifically for giving you a specific kind of energy which you need when you're on the path. And again, Naomi said it a couple weeks ago, she said, what it's like when you're in the woods and it's a little foggy and there's trees all around and you're not sure which path you're following and you kind of get lost a little bit, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, hey, I can see something now. The trees are opening up. There's a little bit of an opening there. Now I can see the opening and now I know I'm on the right path. So what happened to me, and I've been doing this now for 40 years, so I've talked to a lot of people about this process, and it happens to a lot of people, is that at some point you may find yourself confused, thinking, well, what do I do now? Well, I'm kind of a little lost here. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do. I'm not sure if this is the right thing, whatever, right? So some of those worksheets are to give you specific kinds of energy, like confidence, persistence, perseverance. For example, your past successes list, which is a list of where you write down things that you've done successfully in the past. One reason for that worksheet is to remind you that you have been successful in the past and you know what it feels like. I can remember working towards my university degree. That was a path too, right? And when I began, I didn't know what I was going to study. The first couple of years in university, I took all kinds of different things. But as I get into my 3rd year, then I started to narrow it down. Oh, okay, I'm going to get a degree in this, right? And so that's a common experience, to sort of, lose your way for a while, get confused, do different things, and then narrow down your focus and finally say, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on. This is the thing I'm going to do now, right? This is my goal for this week, or this is my goal for this year, or this is my goal for this month. And like I say, you may have 5 or 6 of them. You may have a goal for your relationship. You may have a goal for your health. You may have a goal for your finances, But so that's the purpose of these worksheets, is to help you clarify your dreams, your goals, what it is you want, and to help you identify possible steps you could take along the path to get there, and what kind of thinking do you need to engage in to keep yourself motivated, to keep yourself on the path, to keep yourself persisting. Because, you know, they say a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Everybody's heard that, right? But what they haven't heard is, after you go 8,576 steps and you're still not at your path, you're still not at your goal, what do? Well, the answer is you take one more step. You know, a journey of 1,000 miles, you can go 500 miles and you're still not there. And a lot of people do that, right? I mean, a lot of people, me included, I mean, I can think of lots of times in my life where I started to achieve a goal and then I gave up on it. I didn't think I was good enough, I didn't think I was worthy, or I just lost my focus. You know, I quit something. And maybe, you know, years later, I think about it and I go, man, that was a big mistake to quit. I should have kept on going. If I had persisted and actually achieved that goal, my life would have been way better than it is today, you know. But I didn't realize that in the past. So I quit, you know, I quit that goal. So that's the thing, is to identify what are your real goals that you want to create for yourself, that you want to achieve in your life, and to give you the system that will systematically help you step by step achieve that goal or those goals. So that's the process. So it involves thinking, visualizing yourself, morning and evening visualization, planning your day, planning your activities, and then motivating yourself to take the next step in your plan. And that's really all you ever need to do, is to take the next step. When you get stuck, you know, then just whatever you can think of, take the next step. And the next step might be to listen to a recording or watch one of these videos or read another book or to do a meditation or make a phone call, talk to a friend, you know, figure out what the next step is. So that was a little long-winded there, but I think valuable, you know, to give a kind of a 3,000-foot view of what is this. Because otherwise, you know, you can get bogged down with the worksheets and say, you know, why am I filling out this worksheet here? This doesn't seem to have any point. But if you play with it and you continue to play with it, eventually you'll realize, hey, wait a second, there is a purpose to this. You know, it's like asking myself this question. And I consider the worksheets to be questions that you answer, right? So Arturo. Now Arturo, just by way of introduction, I've never met Arturo. This is the first time he's been here. He showed up a couple of weeks ago, but he didn't have a good Wi-Fi connection and he had to bail out. But Arturo heard me on Coast to Coast AM when I was on there. I think it was August the 2nd I was on there. Yep. And he heard me and he bought a program from me called Cracking the Success Code, which is an audio program that some of you have, right? Naomi's got it. Greg's got it. I'm not sure if Phil has it. But it's a program, and it's a great program. You know, it's audios. But like a lot of my programs, it overlaps this one. It also has a workbook with it. I think it's the same workbook, pretty well the same workbook. So the process of that Cracking the Success Code is the same process as this one, which is figuring out what you want and getting it. So, and just one final thought before I get to you, Arturo. People say what's important about a goal is the person you become in the process of achieving it. And the example that I always think of is Phil Mickelson. You know, he's a famous golfer. When he was a young kid, his dream was to win the U.S. Open. and he's been trying to do that. He's 50 now. I think he's 51. He's never won the U.S. Open. But he's won the Masters, and he's won the the PGA Championship, and he's won the British Open. He's made himself hundreds of millions of dollars, raised a wonderful family. He's got a charitable foundation that helps a lot of people. So he's become this really, well-rounded, successful, wealthy philanthropist, sports person who's known all over the world. But he hasn't achieved his goal yet. And he may never achieve it, because I'm not sure who the oldest person to win the U.S. Open was, but I doubt very much if it was anybody who was older than Phil Mickelson. So he may never achieve the goal. So that's something to think about. Depending on what the goal is, of course, if your goal is to build your business, or your goal is to learn a foreign language, or your goal is to lose 10 pounds, then those kind of goals, you want to achieve those, obviously. But some of your long-range life goals, you may never quite get there, but the pursuit will change you, and that's really the key here. So Arturo, you're up. So just a little 1 or 2 minutes, who are you? Why did you decide to join this group? What are your dreams and goals? Just like I say, 1 or 2, 3 minutes, maybe, just so we know who you are.
Yeah, well, I'm from Houston. I was there delivering newspapers for a long time. I decided to make a change in my life. Everything that I was trying to do working.
I'm having trouble hearing.
Yeah, I don't think we can hear you. So can you speak a little closer to the mic? Is that possible?
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to make a change in my life and my career.
That's much better, yeah.
What I was doing was not working, and for almost 2 years, I filled more than 200 applications, and I was getting rejected. And when I heard doing Coast to Coast, I decided to buy a program, and I started doing the affirmations, like my thoughts are little forces, I've been successful now. And like in about 30 days of doing that, I got a job offer to work for a railroad company. And obviously I said yes. And not only I got a job, but getting that job doubled my income. And in the process, I got a new car too, which was something that I was looking for about a year. And I keep doing and following the affirmations that you taught me. And currently I'm working on new goals, like, getting a promotion, which is in the realm of possibilities now, and also that will increase my income too. And I still have goals in relationships, and getting back to Houston. It's also a possibility within the next 2 weeks. And right now, this week, my goal is to pass my certification exam to become a trained conductor. And that's what I'm working on right now. And I decided to join this group because I had to start, learn from you guys and your experiences as you go through this process of getting goals and following up on your homework, setting your expectations and doing the work. And that's why I'm here, to learn from you.
Great. Well, that's fantastic. So you send out 200 job applications, but you finally got a job with the railway company and double the salary you had before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's a huge win.
Yes.
I mean, talk about a demonstration of persistence, Congratulations.
The only thing I did different than I was doing before was doing the affirmations that you taught. That was the only thing different that I did, so it has to be related to that.
Well, that's fantastic. So just to summarize, because your voice wasn't very clear, I would like to give you a new goal in the next week. Get a better microphone.
I said,
because we can barely understand what you're saying. It's so like the microphone. It's so it's like it has a couple of socks over it or something, and it's all muffled. You know what I mean? It's not very clear.
Yeah, I have the equipment at home. When I get back home next week, you'll hear me better.
Yeah, this one that I've got, it's called it's HD Logitech HB 1080 or something. I think it's around $60, but it's really good. It's got a great microphone and it's got a really good camera, so I use it because, like as I said to you before, maybe before the other people arrived, the camera that's on my laptop and the microphone that's on my laptop, it's just not worth anything, you know. So that's why I use this one. Well, that's great. Congratulations. So the Udemy program that you have, that's got the workbook and a couple of meditation exercises. It's got a copy of my book, Mind, Time, and Power, and it's got about 3.5 hours of video. As a matter of fact, I just put a new video on this week. Kathy, you had a comment?
Yep, just real quick. I have every day I write down to read another chapter of your book. So today, chapter 10, Mind, Time, and Power is on my to-do list.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, that's an admirable goal. So that book, I'm very proud of that book. I think I really think it's a groundbreaking book, and it's got a lot of value. And I realize too that it's not the easiest book to read, even though I tried to make it very, user friendly and simple language and stuff like that. But the idea behind it is that it's a new way of looking at how your mind works, which is a huge topic, right? And we can talk more about that later, perhaps. But yeah, that's great, Kathy. Thanks. I really appreciate that. Now I have another book here. I'll show you. If you go to Amazon, this book here, which is the Mental Magic Life Planning, I call it the Life Planning Workbook. What this is, because when I was writing that book, Mind, Time, and Power, it took me 15 years to finish it altogether, from the time I started until the time I finished. And in the process, I got a degree in philosophy and a degree in linguistics, because I felt like I had to learn more language and more concepts and things to explain what I was trying to explain in this book. So Mind, Time, and Power is sort of my theory of how the mind works, right? It's also got some self-help aspects. It talks about goal setting and that sort of thing. This book here, though, this is specifically sort of a recreation of the weekend workshop that I used to do, that I did all over North America. Well, all over. I did 13 different cities. And I taught it, I've been teaching it for 40 years. As a matter of fact, I'm going to England in April, if everything works out, and I'll be doing it there. So
fun.
So yeah, so that workshop, is about how to design your life and how to create it, So that's a little more user-friendly maybe. Now, Greg has read it. Greg, what do you think of that Mental Magic book? Yeah, you've got it there. Is that a little clearer? Is that a little more user-friendly than the Mind, Time, and Power?
Yeah, I think Mind, Time, and Power, I think you start out with some things that are kind of ideas. It might bring up a little word or sentence that you then explore and you come up to the idea, where I think this is a little bit more direct, where you bring up the idea and say, this is the idea, and then you go the other way. So I found this style a little easier to read.
Yeah.
Of course, in the back, it has the workbook too. So the workbook is in there, which has your planning and sheets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Same as the binder does. But it has some further explanation of how to go through it, how to work the workbook a little bit too. And yeah, so
I think it's more appropriate to what we're doing here than Mind, Time, and Power is.
Yep.
I mean, they're both important. You know, the key idea in Mind, Time, and Power is that your mind works in the future and the past equally.
Right.
You know, we're normally thinking that a memory is kind of a mental snapshot, kind of like opening a binder of your holiday photographs and looking at the pictures of your holiday. That seems to be the way we think about what memory is. And the way we normally think of the future is that it's like we don't know anything about it. It hasn't happened yet. It's, you know, it's a crapshoot. We don't know what's going on. And so that's normally the way that we understand the past and the future. And both of those I deconstruct in Mind, Time, and Power to some degree. And I give a new model, which is that your mind is like this computer that I'm on right now. It not only has a bunch of programs in it that I can use to do different tasks, but it's connected to every other computer on Earth. Theoretically, right? And it's that connection, that's the key idea in Mind, Time, and Power, is that your imagination is like an internet connection, only it doesn't connect you to a computer, it connects you to a place in time. So some of those connections are what you call memories, right? Like if I think of something in my past that happened, then like I remember walking across the stage, for example, getting my degree from the University of British Columbia. That's a really clear memory. I remember that happening. So when I remember that, what I'm doing in my understanding is I'm connecting to that time. I'm connecting to that point in time. So that past success, that moment in time when I walked across the stage and got my degree, that's one of my past successes. And every time I think of that success, I am connecting to that moment. And what comes flooding into my body is feelings of pride, accomplishment, satisfaction, personal power. So that's the purpose of the past successes list, is to identify times in the past when you did something that had very specific, powerful, positive energy that you can tap into again now. The same as we can all tap into this. You're all tapped into my microphone and my camera right now through your computers. And I'm tapped into your computers, right? So that's the key insight that I got, which I wrote Mind, Time, and Power about. And this process that we're doing in this book, hopefully, and all the other work that I'm doing, is basically, okay, so what? Now that you understand that, what do you do with it? Well, what do you do with it is you use the past to motivate yourself and to, you know, you can also heal the past, you can change the past. We've talked a little bit about that up to now. And also you can design the future. So my model of the future is like planning a trip. Like right now I'm planning a trip to England, right? So, you know, where I stay, some of the people I'm going to meet, some of the places I'm going to go, some of the things I'm going to do, I'm planning those now. Those are goals. Well, they're dreams and they're goals, right? But when I get to England, it's going to be my physical reality, right? So that when I get to England, assuming that I get there, because who knows, I mean, something may happen, COVID, you know. But assuming that I actually get there, you know, when I stand up in front of my first audience in a place called Bournemouth in the south of England, I'm going to be doing some training there. When I stand up in front of that audience and all those people in that room, that event is going to be something that I created out of thin air. That's how I look at it. And that's literally what we do every day. All of us do that every single day. You know, the reason that I'm with you right now is because I turned on my computer, set my alarm clock, set the thing up, and here I am, and we're all here together, right? So every day we are using our mind to create our life. Some of them are big goals, some of them are small goals. And so the process of this workbook is the process of becoming more conscious of that, so that we can do it with more control. Because a lot of the things that we achieve in our life, a lot of the things that we create in our life, are things that we do by accident. We don't, maybe we decided something in the past, and then, now we're living with it, right? And we forgot that we decided to do that. So a large part of this process, this unfolding of our consciousness, as we're talking about, is getting in touch with those thoughts, those feelings, the beliefs, the thoughts, the attitudes that we developed in the past. Some of them consciously, some of them unconsciously, but we developed them for some purpose in the past. And now maybe they're not serving us anymore. So these are attitudes or beliefs or ways of looking at the world, ways of looking at ourselves. Like one of our creations is our self-image. And we think of our self-image as me, I, We forget that we created it. But if you think about it, of course, you weren't born with this self-image. Somehow it developed. And largely, perhaps, it developed in reaction to things that happened to you when you were young, and some of the decisions that you made, and some of the things that you heard, which you adopted as a good attitude to have. But now you have this self-image, and is it still serving you? Do you want to change it? So that's the purpose of this, going through this process, this expanding our awareness. The Greeks used to say, "Know thyself." So that's what we're doing. We're trying to know ourselves, know our power, know our abilities. Any comments there?
No, I was just going to tell Thurl that I too listened to Coast AM but this was 5-6 years ago now. So yeah, you reached a lot of people through that, Anthony.
Yes, it's about time I went back on. I think I'm going to contact them and say, okay, here, I'm back, because Greg came from there too. And Arturo came from there, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
yeah. So
Anthony, it's a great story that you told me about your last appearance on Coast to Coast. That you used that as a deadline to get your workbook completed. That there was a linkage there.
Oh yeah, this book here that I told that story online. I mean, to this group. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Because when I think I was on Coast to Coast in February this year, or last year, and I just mentioned casually, that I'm working on this other book, because he said to me, "Are you working on any other books or any other things?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm working on this book." He said, "Oh, great. Well, when you finish it, give us a call and we'll put you back on." So, I guess it was August, summertime, June, July, August. So I called them and I contacted them in July and said, I'm interested in coming back on the show. And so the first thing that they asked me was, "Have you finished the book you were talking about?" Well, I hadn't finished it. So I said, "Yes, yeah," because I had 2 weeks before my date on the show, right? So I thought, man, I got to finish that book. I mean, I can't go on the show and not have the book done. They're going to know I lied to them, right? So I got to finish that book. So man, I worked on that book 12 hours a day. I thought it was about 90% finished. Well, maybe in terms of the writing, it was 90% finished. But then in the formatting and all the other stuff, grammar checking and spell checking and putting in pictures and everything else, and designing a cover. And I think I finally got the thing for sale on Amazon like the day before I was on the show. So yeah, thanks, Phil. So that is that's a great example of the power of a deadline, right? And of course, the power has, there's two sides to it, right? One is, what's it going to be worth to me when I finish this book? And the other one is, what's it going to cost me if I don't finish the book? So you got to work both sides. Like, what is the benefit of me doing this, getting this job, and what's it going to cost me if I don't get this job? Right, Arturo?
Wouldn't be here.
If I don't get the job, man, if I don't get a new job, my life isn't going to be anywhere near as good, right? So, yeah. So, it's good to remind ourselves that we do have this power, that we have, achieved these things, and that we can do it again, right?
Could I make a suggestion, and that is that maybe you look at your trip to the UK as a that in terms of what you might be talking about, on that radio show would be talking about how what new things came up through making that trip and reaching that dream and that goal.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And so here's my secret weapon, right? And so the other day I started to I just made a brief list. These are some goals I'm working on today, right? So the first one is my trip to the UK. Second one is I'm working with a producer to turn my story into a movie. The next one is the calls that we're doing here, our live Q&A calls. Another goal I'm working on is what am I going to do with the 53 calls we've done already? I got all kinds of recordings and information and everything about that. Plus, I have coaching clients I'm working with. I'm making a bunch of new TikTok videos. I'm setting up some public speaking here in the UK, but also in Victoria before I leave. I'm working on a graphic novel, working with an artist. And plus I started two new meetup groups within the last couple of weeks. That doesn't mention a couple of books I'm working on, and that all that stuff. So I got a full plate. So what I do is morning visualization. What am I going to do today? How am I going to do it? What's my attitude? Can I see myself doing this, moving ahead today? And then evening meditation. Review my day. What did I do? Did it work? Did it not work? Can I do it better? What's going to happen next week? And so, because this trip I'm taking to the UK, not only am I going to visit my hometown where I was born, but I'm going to be doing some traveling. I'm going to be visiting some family. I have family there. Plus, there's a bunch of places I want to go see. I'm also planning to go to Paris for a little while and to Munich. I used to live in Munich. I have lots of friends. Well, not a lot of friends anymore, but I have some friends there that I want to go visit. So, it's going to be 6 weeks probably. It's going to be jam-packed. So there's a lot of moving parts to it, that I have to get together. Like, for example, when I do my speaking in Bournemouth, I'm writing a new kind of a booklet for specifically for that, right? So that I can give it to people. So yeah. So thanks, Phil. Thanks for that. But I mean, assuming I get back on Coast to Coast, I probably will talk about that because I think people in England probably listen to that show too. You know. Naomi, any comments, questions? We haven't seen you for about 2 or 3 weeks, right?
Yeah. Well, the Europeans don't have to wait, and I mean they can listen to it early morning or whatever, so they don't have to stay up all night.
Yeah, I don't know.
So-
They're 8 hours ahead of where I am here, so
Mhm.
I'm not sure what time it shows up in the UK. But it's on in Vancouver. At least it used to be. I'm not sure that it still is. But there's a radio station in Vancouver that it used to be on, and it was on. I think it started at 9 o'clock in the evening.
Oh,
I thought it
that's
was, I
not
thought it
bad.
was later.
Yeah.
I thought it was later than that.
Yeah, I think it's it depends which town you're in or which time zone you're in. I think when it goes on.
Mhm.
There's an app too. You can watch it after hours. You can.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, I
that's right.
suppose.
That's
Yep.
right. Yeah, you
Yep.
can you can become a coast to coast insider, for a couple dollars a
Mhm.
month, I think, and you can get access to the archive.
Mhm.
Kathy,
So I've
any-
been reading.
Oh,
Well,
sorry.
I've been reading just that James Allen, the guy at the turn of the 19th century or 20th century. All his little excerpts. Boy, he's a powerful writer. Absolutely. As a Man Thinketh, that was his main claim to fame. But there's a lot of different. I've got a thick book. I mean, it's like maybe like 900 pages or huge.
Wow.
It's like 17 books all consolidated, and it's really wow. But the best one is As the Man Thinketh.
Well, that's
Just
his
talk
most
about your
famous.
thoughts,
Yeah,
just
that-
what you were talking about.
yeah, that's his most famous one, right?
Yep,
Um,
that is a really good one. I
don't-
recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, recommend my book too.
Oh, definitely.
Now one of the things that what Naomi said triggered me here. One of the things that I recommend all of you do is start your own group. I mean, I get so many benefits from working with you guys every week. It really helps me focus my thinking and achieve more, and also the insights that I get because I edit these videos every week. And so in the process of editing them, I listen to them 3, 4, 5 times, and it's amazing to me how much insightful comments and feedback and ideas come up that maybe I didn't notice the first time through because, I'm kind of focused on my role in this, right? But lots of times when I go through the videos again and edit them, I get a lot out of it, a lot more maybe than I thought was even in there, So I recommend, re-listening to them or, re-watching them. You can probably download the recording of it and put it on your phone and listen to it, during the day when you're around. Any other comments?
I want to make a comment on that, by the way, Anthony. I was just laughing to myself because you said start your own group, and I thought I don't know how to do that, but I think you just outlined how to make things happen. I mean, mental magic, right? I mean, isn't that the process?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And the easiest way would be a book club.
Well, but I mean, I put it on my dream list when you just said that. I guess is my point. If it's not on the dream list,
Yeah.
it's not going to be created, right?
Well, perhaps. I mean, you can create it without writing it down. But no, I would recommend that all of you have your own group. And the easiest thing, it seems to me, to start would be a book club, And you can start with As a Man Thinketh, Naomi, if you want.
Mhm.
Because anything that's positive, anything that sort of highlights the fact that we have this incredible mind that will literally, literally it's making our life every day. And when we learn to use it as a tool, then that transforms everything, because then you realize, oh, hey, I can actually use it, right? So one idea that I've been playing around with is this idea of, if your mind is a tool, like a phone, cell phone, you know, or a computer, then what kind of apps does it have? So there's an interesting question, right? Like, I have apps on my phone and on my computer. Well, I have one that's called email, right? I have one that's called Microsoft Word. Well, those two things are completely different, right? But of course, I can use them together, because if I send an email out, I often write it as a Word document first, correct the spelling and the grammar, and then I'll copy it onto a email, then I'll send it to people, right? But I have another one that I can edit audios. I can record audios on my computer, and I can edit those. Completely different usage for my computer, right? I mean, auditing, you know, recording an audio and editing it is different from sending an email. It's different from recording a video like I'm recording this one. They're different apps. So when you think about that, then you realize, well, wait a second, what kind of apps do I have in my brain, in my mind? Well, I'm going to suggest a couple here. One is your past successes list, which is specifically designed to collect ideas that give you confidence and increase your feelings of personal power. That's a great app to have. Another one, of course, is your dream list, which is like, oh, how do I want my future to look a year from now? That's a different app, right? Another app might be, I have this relationship issue with my siblings. I'd like to, you know, there's some negative energy around that relationship. What can I do to change it? What could I say? What could I do? Who could I talk to that might, you know, give me some feedback or help me improve the energy around this particular relationship, right? So to me, if I think of them as different apps, then I realize, hey, you know, some people don't have those apps, right? They don't know that those apps exist. I mean, we all have these apps on our phones, and each time we download a new app, it sort of makes our phone do something new, right? So I think that's a great concept that, you know, like a lot of people pay lip service to the idea that your mind is a computer. They haven't made the leap yet to realize, well, the reason that your computer is so powerful is because it's connected to the internet. You know, when the internet goes out, the computer is nowhere near as valuable, right? Depending on what you're using it for. But I mean, if you're using it to watch movies on Netflix and your Wi-Fi goes out, then it's like, oh, I can't watch my favorite movies now. What can I do? I can play music, perhaps, if I have some recorded music on my computer. So that's the key idea, is that your mind is a connection. Greg, any pearls of wisdom? Phil's got to leave.
Sorry about that.
Thanks for being here, Phil.
Okay, see you in 2 weeks.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you'll tell us about your meditation retreat. Okay.
Have a great 2 weeks, you guys.
Nice meeting you.
Thanks, Phil.
Bye.
Be here. You'll see me again.
Yeah.
Great.
I was just going to say that, you know, one of the things that came up on Coast to Coast in your book and in your class was certainly this idea of time, which is different than, you know, some of the things in the workbook are the application of goal setting and planning, which I think are quite commonly known or out there. Some of your things on time take a different cut at kind of As a Man Thinketh and Think and Grow Rich and some of those things, and I think make it more practical in some ways to how to do that. I think I read some of those books originally, and I just didn't know how to do it. It was too big a jump to start thinking big, for example. But I think when you look at time and say there's two images, kind of a before and after, and to be able to click your finger and make before and after happen is kind of the challenge. I don't think people, I mean, we kind of all end up in places down the road in our life that is kind of like the football player in the one analogy you mentioned, bumping into us. I think people and things bump us into different areas of our life, and we end up down the road like, how did I get like this? How did our life become like this? And I think it happens randomly for a lot of people, and people they bump into, and maybe there's some serendipity or some fate involved in that. But at the same time, I think saying, well, I want to be able to change my life in a different direction. How do I do that and work backwards? And I think that's, even today as you're speaking, you're talking about how you're doing your morning meditation and focusing on the goals. That was something I hadn't seen you say before or heard before. But some of the practical ways you're doing it, but I like it. It's kind of the wizard, Merlin. How does Merlin achieve what he does? Well, he waves a wand in the movies and stuff and makes something happen. How do we do that in our own life, where we make magic happen? And magic's the acronym for some of the tools you have. But that's what's truly unique, I think, about your. The Mental Magic book doesn't have a real lot of that. I think Time, Life, and Power has more of it. And so it's almost like the precursor book, or prerequisite, I guess, to that other book, and I just don't know if you mentioned that a real lot here today.
Yeah, well, the book that I'm working on now, that I'm editing, I originally wrote it in '85. So it's 35 years ago, right? And that's the original book that I wrote, which contains a lot of the ideas that are in Mind, Time, and Power, but Mind, Time, and Power is more my theory of what thinking is. Thinking is time traveling. That's it in a nutshell. Every thought is an instance of mental time travel. Now, all kinds of people talking about it now, but when I discovered it in 1980, I was the only one talking about that. So yeah, the idea, and this is what you just alluded to, that all these tools, goal setting, visualizing, creative visualization, journaling, these things have been around for years, but my great insight into it was the reason it works is because your mind is a time machine. That's the reason that goal setting works, is because when you're setting a goal, you sort of project your consciousness into the future and you start dialoguing with your future self. How can I do this? What do I need to do to get there? Well, people don't talk about that because I think by and large, they're not really aware of it. Even, like going back a couple thousand years ago. So when you read some of the ancient wisdom and some of these success books that were written either 100 years ago, like As a Man Thinketh, or 2,500 years ago, like Buddha saying we make our world with our thoughts, or Paul Meyer saying the reason you're not achieving your goals is because your goals are not clear enough. All those things refer to the process of using your mind as a time machine, but nobody talked about it before I came along. I didn't hear anybody talking about it back in 1980. But starting in around 1995, the scientists started to talk about it because they realized that what we normally call memory is really just daydreaming. That's what it is. Whereas the reason they started doing the research in 95 is because they were looking for the place in the brain where memories are stored. They thought memories were somehow encoded in the brain. Well, now, I sent you a video this week, I think, which has a couple of scientists talking about now they're starting to think that the place that memory is stored is in time. It's outside the brain. Well, how does that work? Well, I know how it works. It's in my inner field of space-time. You know, my memory of walking across the stage and getting my degree from UBC, I know exactly where that is. I can draw a picture of where it is on my little chart of inner space-time. But the scientists are going, woo, what does that mean if it's in time? You know, they don't know what that's about. Okay, thanks, Kathy.
Okay, bye. See you guys next week.
See you next time. Yeah.
Bye.
So the purpose of these calls, Arturo, is to encourage people to keep working in that Udemy program, filling out the worksheets, asking the questions, answering the questions, clarifying our thinking, and that's it. Keeping us
Good
on
program.
keeping us on the path. Yeah.
I don't know if you sent that article on the two scientists thinking to everybody, but I did listen to it. It was very interesting what they were taking mice, for example, in a maze and cutting out in different experiments where they cut out different parts of the memory or the mind rather,
Yeah.
the brain. And then yet they could cut out different parts and it would shift where the memory was kept in the mind. So they could still figure it out until they cut the whole brain out. They said they couldn't do the maze anymore, but just because they were paralyzed. But they couldn't figure out it was floating around in the mind.
Well, they
or
have
the brain.
no idea. They have no idea, right? They're just literally clutching at straws. Now, I've used this analogy before, but I'll just mention it again. Because this is how our mind works, as far as I'm concerned. At least it's one way that our mind works. That we perceive something. We have this thing called perception. So we look in the world and we see stuff. And then inside we have conception, which is how do we conceive of something? So what we're doing all the time, it's unconscious and it's automatic, is we are creating internal models so that we can understand what we're seeing, what we're experiencing outside. And so in 1615, when Galileo built his telescope, he proved that the sun went around, or the earth went around the sun. He proved it because he could see it through his telescope. That was the first time that they had any physical evidence that the sun was the center of the solar system. They had been debating it for 20 centuries, 2,000 years or more, and they couldn't find they couldn't resolve the argument. Are the stars going around the earth? Is the sun going around the earth, or is the earth going around the sun? They couldn't figure it out because they didn't have any scientific evidence. Well, the same thing is true for the mind. If you read As a Man Thinketh, or you study Buddhism, or you study Taoism, or you study any of the great philosophers or the mystery schools who explain how we create our life with our thinking, scientists completely lost track of it around 100 years ago because they were looking for evidence. I remember when I was studying linguistics, I learned that in the 50s, scientists were looking in the brain to see where words were stored. They thought when you learn a word, it's actually stored someplace in the gray matter in your brain. Well, then they finally realized, oh, it's not, it's someplace else. Then they realized, oh, well, speaking is a behavior. Well, thinking is a behavior too. That's what I talk about in Mind, Time, and Power. So, but my point is that the people back in the 17th century, 1615, they were building models that duplicated the motion of the planets in the sky. In other words, they had physical models made of metal and wood and whatever that would duplicate how the planets moved around the sky. Because at some point, if you watch the planets going around, at some point they back up, right? Are you familiar with that? It's called retrograde motion, right?
They move backwards, you said?
They move backwards, yeah. So, for example, if you look at Mars in the sky, it moves forward for a while and then it moves backwards. Well, why is that? Well, the reason it is because the Earth's orbit is smaller than Mars's orbit. So every once in a while, Earth passes Mars, and it looks like it's going back against the backdrop of the stars, right? If you're watching it from the Earth, it looks like it's going backwards. Well, how did they explain that? Well, they were able to explain it. As a matter of fact, they built a model. They came up with this concept of epicycles. They said, oh, there's these different cycles within cycles, like gear within gears, that actually duplicated the motion of these stars and the planets. Completely wrong, right? Totally wrong. Well, that's what the scientists have been doing for the last 100 years, trying to figure out how the mind works and what memory is. And finally, they're realizing, well, it looks like memory is not in the brain. Where is it? Well, maybe it's in time, So they're flailing, But when you read As a Man Thinketh, and you read some of these New Thought books, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, or The Science of Getting Rich, or The Master Key that I talked about before. Those books were written over 100 years ago. They contain all this information. They talk about focusing your energy will change your brain. Well, scientists said, that's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. There's no way that thinking will change your brain. Well, in 1995, they discovered, hey, guess what? Thinking changes your brain. Well, Wallace Wattles talked about that in 1900. They said he was a fool, right? So, and Buddha says, don't believe anything I say. Try it for yourself. So, yeah, so I think it's time to wrap this up. But anybody have any final comments? Arturo?
No, just keep working on myself and trying to go to a bit of that dialogue, negative dialogue in my head, and see how I do until next week.
Well, it's great to see you. It's great to see you here. I'm really glad that you decided to join us, and congratulations on getting your job. And good luck with your final exams or tests this week. I'm sure you'll do fine with it. And we'll see you next week.
Great.
Great.
Sounds good. See you guys.
Thanks.
Yep. Bye.
See you later.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.
For information about this online community, to get your own copy of the book upon which this entire training series is based, either the ebook, the paperback, or the audiobook, go to learntodesignyourlife.com, where you can also get a free copy of this Design Your Life workbook.